Before we start, I'd like to quickly review some housekeeping details to ensure this virtual forum is as accessible as possible. Please click the globe icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen to enable interpretation. You may have to click ... more if you are logged on through a mobile device. Next, please select either English or Spanish. And lastly, it is recommended that you mute the original audio. ALS interpreters should always be visible on your screen. For CART, to see the closed captioning, please click on the ... more button and click on Show Subtitle. So let's begin. We are pleased to speak with Attorney General and Democratic nominee for Governor of Massachusetts, Maura Healey, for this disability-focused virtual gubernatorial forum. My name is Jossie Burks Abbott, and I am an autism self-advocate and author. Visual description: I am a Black man with short hair and glasses, wearing a brown collared shirt and tie with white polka dots. And my background displays the logos of all the sponsoring agencies. I currently serve on the Massachusetts Developmental Disabilities Council, where I chair the policy subcommittee, and am on the faculty of the LEND program at Boston Children's Hospital. So it is with great interest that I opened today's forum. Important to note that the 2022 Massachusetts gubernatorial election will take place on November 8th, 2022, when we will elect a new governor of Massachusetts, since incumbent Republican Governor Charlie Baker is not seeking re-election after 2 terms. This event has been organized by Advocates for Autism of Massachusetts, Boston Center for Independent Living, the Disability Law Center, Mass Advocates Standing Strong, the Massachusetts Developmental Disabilities Council, and the ARC of Massachusetts. We'd also like to thank the many co-sponsors for their help in making this forum possible, and Maura Healey for taking the time to meet with us today. The general election is Tuesday, November 8th, and on this slide, there are resources to learn more about the election and voting. It's important to announce that we received a large number of questions from our broad constituency, and carefully sorted by topic to ensure a wide range of important issues are covered. If after this forum you have additional questions, please contact the organizers of this forum, specifically those listed on the slide if you have any further questions. Additionally, the Secretary of State's website has an easy-to-follow election information page where you can find out how to register to vote and everything else you need to know about the election process. And this slide shows additional resources about voting access. I am pleased to introduce you to Diana who will moderate questions and explain today's rules of order. Diana is now a software engineer at Google, chairperson of the Boston Center for Independent Living, and board member of the Riders Transportation Access Group. Diana, I now turn it over to you.
Thanks very much, Jossie, for the introduction. And hi, everyone. I'm Diana Hu, chairperson of the Boston Center for Independent Living and your moderator for this afternoon. I'm an Asian American woman sitting atop my motorized wheelchair and wearing a black short sleeve shirt with a black flower collar. My background also shows the logos of all the sponsoring organizations whose partnership and support have made this event possible. So welcome everyone to today's edition of the Virtual Disability Forum Series, Conversations with Candidates for Governor of Massachusetts. This is a great opportunity to have a dialogue with our gubernatorial candidates and really get their thoughts and perspectives on some of the most critical issues that people with disabilities are facing in the present day. Understanding our leaders is a key step to voting for our leaders, to supporting them so that they can support us and our needs as part of the disability community. And today we're excited to have with us Maura Healey, Massachusetts Attorney General and the Democratic nominee for Massachusetts Governor. We'll begin the event with Attorney General Healey's opening remarks, and then we'll move to a Q&A session. And finally, we'll end with Attorney General Healey's closing remarks. Please also note that we are recording this event for folks who are unable to attend or who would like to rewatch or tune in later. We had a lot of thoughtful questions submitted in advance, with topics ranging from healthcare to education to employment to transportation to housing to accessibility and more. Unfortunately, we won't be able to take live questions for this event, but we want to emphasize that the questions we're asking today, they come straight from the disability community and reflect many top community concerns. But before we get to that Q&A, a bit of background on our candidate with us today. Attorney General Maura Healey has deep roots in Massachusetts soil, both from her family and herself. She attended Harvard College with a concentration in government and then earned her JD from Northeastern University School of Law. She later served as chief of the Civil Rights Division in the Massachusetts Attorney General's office, spearheading the state's challenge to the Defense of Marriage Act. Maura Healey was elected in 2014 and then re-elected in 2018 as the first openly gay Attorney General in the country. One of her many accomplishments as the people's lawyer includes establishing the office's first ever community engagement division to go into communities, share resources, and empower people through education about their rights. We're grateful to Attorney General Healey for taking the time and the consideration to be with us here today. And please, Attorney General Healey, the floor is yours for your opening remarks.
Well, thank you so much, Diana. It's great to be with you, Jassy, everyone who is on this call today. And I want to thank you for joining us. I am a white woman wearing a green jacket and a navy blue shirt, and have short brown hair. My background is a light gray wall today. I would love to start by thanking this community for the advocacy. You know, some of you know a little bit about me through the work that we've done together in the Attorney General's office. But I want to say at the outset how grateful I am to all of you. I remember when I first met Bill Henning at BCIL and Leo and so many others along the way who have helped to educate me, who have helped to inform me, both as my work as a lawyer and as Attorney General. And I want to begin by thanking all of you. I do have Massachusetts roots, though I grew up just over the border in New Hampshire, and I'm the oldest of five. My mom was a nurse and my grandmother was a nurse, and I think I grew up with a healthy appreciation for caretakers and caregivers and the importance of that work, and that has always stayed with me. I also grew up in a small town. And eventually made my way here to Massachusetts for college, as Diana said. At some point after an unlikely basketball career, I decided to go to law school. And one of my first co-ops at Northeastern Law School was working for a federal judge named Judge Reginald Lindsay. And Judge Lindsay had been in a chair for a number of years due to a spinal injury. And it was really through my work directly with him, and we became very close friends for many, many years, right up until the time he sadly passed away, that I had developed a much deeper appreciation for the discrimination faced by so many in the disability community. And whether it was trying to get to restaurants or to meetings or into buildings that just lacked the accessibility, I just saw firsthand up close what was happening to him. And, you know, later on, I after years in private practice, I had the privilege to start in the Attorney General's office as civil rights chief. And one of the things I got to do in that division was oversee and support our disability rights advocacy in that unit within that division. And with some of you, I worked on issues of everything from making our movie theaters and ATMs and kiosks more accessible. We did a number of cases in the fair housing space, people who are looking to discriminate against people and their service animals. We worked on a number of fronts. And again, I am grateful to you for that collaboration. When I got elected Attorney General, one of the first things I did was set up a Disability Rights Advisory Council so that we could hear in the office directly from advocates across the disability community to make sure that their perspective was driving policy, driving the work in the office. And I thank you for those of you who participated on that council. Together, we took on the Trump administration for undermining PCAs. We strengthened the PCA Workforce Council by appointing new members with disabilities. We also filed a bill to improve our enforcement tools to protect our seniors, people with disabilities, people in nursing homes from abuse and neglect. And this is legislation that I would like to sign as governor. I've been very proud of the partnership that we've had together and grateful for everything I've learned from you. As we look ahead, should I be elected governor, and I hope I am, I know we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do to make our state more accessible and fair for people with disabilities. I also know that there are a few things we need to really focus on right away. Probably near the top, the housing crisis. Housing is unaffordable for too many across the state. And I know that people with disabilities are experiencing this crunch acutely. We need to expand our housing stock rapidly. We need to expand the Massachusetts rental voucher program and the alternative housing voucher program. We also need to improve our transportation, obviously, significantly reshaping how we manage public transportation, expanding service, and making sure that our stations, our trains, our buses are accessible to all, and that the resources are in place regionally. Okay, so not just within Greater Boston, but all across, from Berkshires to Hamden, down to the South Coast and the Southeast, and across Central Mass. That is really, really important, and something as a matter of equity that I am focused on, the geographic disparities within our state and what we need to do in terms of resources. And I think probably just about top of the list has to be workforce. I can't tell you how many programs I've heard from over the course of this campaign where things I know are in dire shape in terms of lack of workforce. And that results in people not being able to get the care that they need. And that is something we absolutely need to address by investing in our care economy so that people have the in-home assistance that they need to live independently. We need to also, make sure that we are doing everything we can with workforce across a range of needs right now. And that, includes obviously, looking at what we need to do to grow a pipeline through job training programs, paying people well. And there's just a lot of work I know that we need to do in this space. So again, I'm just grateful to have the conversation with you today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Attorney General Healey. It's really empowering to see all of the work that you've done as Attorney General and on really promoting disability rights as civil rights. And thank you for listening to our needs and working with us to continue fighting that good fight. And I want to start the questions today with an education question. And the question is this: how will you work to ensure also that Massachusetts schools drop the practice of segregated classrooms for students with disabilities and move to a more inclusive education for all, especially in urban school districts and also beyond?
Well, thank you for this question. Obviously, Chapter 766, really important. We know that segregated classrooms limit the opportunities of students with disabilities to access academic and extracurricular activities. And as a result, they suffer, and that's just not right. So we know that also that most students with disabilities can succeed and really succeed in inclusive classrooms with the proper supports and accommodations. So here's what I think we need to do in Massachusetts. And I know that just a few years ago, maybe in 2017, the National Council on Disability found that Massachusetts, along with maybe New Jersey, Connecticut, another state, had among the highest rates of placement in special schools or residential programs. So here's what we need to do. One, we've got to start by training teachers, educators on finding ways to better integrate special education with the regular classroom experience. Training and training and training. Next, I think we need to analyze the placement data. I want to know across school districts in cities, and towns, and other communities, I want to know placement rates so that we can uncover any disproportionate placement practices for students that are harming students with disabilities. So I think those two things are really important. I would welcome a review of how effectively Massachusetts is upholding the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which, as we know, is intended to protect students with disabilities from classroom and school segregation. And finally, I will continue to be an advocate at the federal level to receive federal funding for the resources that we need in order to uphold our obligations under the law.
That sounds like a strong plan. Yeah. And I also want to sort of move to a question on the transition for when students are coming out of that school system or when they're turning 22 years old. This marks a great transition for students with disabilities who need to move away from an educational system that has, for the majority of their lives, provided the services and supports that they've needed to live and thrive in the community. And the question is, how would you work toward ensuring that successful transition for all students with disabilities who are turning 22 and now are in need of adult services?
Well, I think the first thing is let's recognize and emphasize that work has to begin and be built out long before a student turns 22. So, we need to be working on the education and the employment plans for students with disabilities long before they turn 22. And that means getting students into the educational programs through the years that meet their competency and allow them to maximize and reach their full potential before they turn 22. I know that life after 22, it looks different for all of us, but for everyone, we have an obligation to make sure that students are given the resources along the way. I also think that in addition from that being my mindset around this, the work has got to start, day one, from a student's entry into learning. We also need to build up resources at DDS because unless there are resources at DDS, we're not going to have the resources that are there to best assist our students and their families, by the way. Of course, their families are so critically important in the planning process and making sure that they are getting connected with the appropriate adult services for their individual needs. Again, I mentioned pipeline. This is an area where we really need to build up pipelines for these students around employment opportunities. And I want to work to make sure that we are connecting students with affordable higher education, fulfilling employment opportunities, and finally, housing, making sure that students have access to affordable and accessible housing. So these are the things that we need to do. I think we know what we need to do, but it is a matter of driving that with intentionality and with urgency. And it breaks my heart to think of instances where a student, a young person is life is going to change at 22. And, the fact of the matter is we as a state have an obligation to make sure that we are doing everything we can for that person and their family so that they have the opportunity. And I just don't want to see instances where people fall through the cracks. Obviously, more work to do around employment, around housing, and of course, the resources all the way through in the years before 22 to get people to where they need to be.
Wow, yeah. Thank you so much. It really shows that you have a deep grasp of this issue, that for education, this is something that starts from day one onward, and just really equipping students with disabilities with the resources that they need, from housing to employment opportunities and onward. That's a really strong plan for success. Yeah. Thank you. And I want to move to another question. This is about direct service workers and the fact that community-based programs and services for people with disabilities are currently facing a crisis level shortage of staff. And what would be the Healey administration's plans or funding to support wages and benefits and recruitment for personal care attendants, for clinical staff, and for other essential direct service workers?
Yeah. Well, Diana, I know that there's a workforce crisis across so many sectors right now in our state, but perhaps no sector is experiencing it more than human services and healthcare right now. And I know, and the consequence of that, where people are relying on that care, is just absolutely devastating. So it's pretty clear we need to invest in workforce. We need to go out and recruit and train up and develop a pipeline of future PCAs and other direct care workers. That includes building out programs in vocational schools and in community colleges, as well as in our high schools. Mayor Driscoll and I recently announced a program, Mass Reconnect. This is a program that basically will make job training available to residents 25 years and older who may not be in the workforce, but who could be brought back into the workforce to be trained and receive the certification to go out and fill some of these incredibly important positions. It's aimed at helping older and non-traditional students complete their education and train them for good jobs in human services and healthcare and the like. And so those are some of the things that we need to do. And obviously this comes down to pay too. And I recognize that any number of people have left jobs that are so critically important, where you're taking care of a human being. I mean, what is more important than that, to go work at places like Amazon and Target that pay more? And this gets to what we value as a state. And I value people, and we need to make sure that we are there with the incentives and that we have done the work to grow this workforce. I don't want to hear another story, and I've heard too many folks not able to go to day programs, not able to participate in the activities that they used to participate in simply because of workforce issues.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah. I mean, yeah, since the start of the pandemic, there have been so many folks with disabilities who have been shut out from access to day programs from the Department of Developmental Services because of this limited staffing for programs and for transportation. So I think, yeah, it sounds like Mass Reconnect is going to be a great way to help, fuel the staffing, so that there are resources there for these incredibly important programs. And thank you. And I want to move to a question that you've touched on the personal care attendant program, and I want to hear more about your thoughts there. And the state's personal care attendant program provides services to over 40,000 people with disabilities, including those with physical and intellectual disabilities, as well as many seniors. There are over 55,000 PCAs on that program, predominantly low-income women, immigrants, and members of the BIPOC communities. And upon taking office, we've seen an unfortunate precedent where many previous administrations, going back to the 1990s, have targeted this program for cuts without understanding that it's one of the most vital independent living programs in the state, and an important source of income as well for low-income people. And on a personal level, Mass Health's PCA program it's one of the main reasons why I've decided to call Massachusetts my home. My PCAs get me out of bed in the morning and assist me with all my activities of daily living so that I can lead an independent life, not in an institution, but in the control of my own place to call home. And the question is, will you support this PCA program and work with advocates and labor representatives to strengthen rather than reduce the program?
Absolutely. Absolutely, Diana. Remember, it was the team and I in the Attorney General's office who sued the Trump administration when they tried to undermine the bargaining power of tens of thousands of Massachusetts PCAs. I've been a proud supporter of the Workforce Council and made sure that it had representation from disability community. And I've been very proud to be, I think, the first candidate for governor in over a generation to receive the endorsement of every SEIU local in Massachusetts, which represents our PCAs. I've been able to spend a lot of time with PCAs over the last many years, as well as clients, and to hear the stories, and it's a no-brainer. Of course we need to do that. Of course we need to do that. You were just an example of why of why this is so absolutely critical. So look, as governor, I'm going to continue to stand up for the tens of thousands of home care workers who are providing vital care, compassionate care, to ensure that people are able to live independently, to live safely, to live with dignity. This is absolutely what we need to do. And that includes, of course, addressing the issues of compensation and recruitment.
Thank you so much, Attorney General Healey. This is really a fundamental grasping of PCA program as a matter of dignity, as a matter of being able to live with freedom. So I really appreciate your answer and your commitment to help strengthening this program. It really means a lot. And I want to move to another question. You touched on this in your opening remarks about transportation as a critical issue for the general population and very critical for people with disabilities, whether the transportation involves the Human Services Transportation Office, accessibility of the MBTA, including the RIDE paratransit service, or adequate funding for regional transit authorities. Accessible transportation is fundamental to community integration and independent living for people with disabilities. And I want to understand, what will you do to improve transportation for the disability community?
This is really important. I've said, just as a general matter for our state, we don't have a functioning economy without a functioning public transportation system. And I've been really clear about my plans for that and the investments that we need to make so that we have a public transit system that is safe, that is accessible and reliable and affordable. And obviously there are projects that are, big scale projects that we've discussed in the state that I support the funding for, but also, paying attention to the work of our RTAs, the work of the RIDE, and other programs. I mean, we have to do this, and it just should never be the case that people are unable to access the public transportation that they are absolutely entitled to access under law. And I know this is a struggle at times for people with disabilities, with some of the wait times and the lack of services. So I want to work on that. I want to build on. I know that the Department of system-wide accessibility, working with the T in particular on advancing equal access and compliance with ADA rules. That's something that's very important, and I will work to support that department. I will work to support resources for the RIDE, and it's well beyond the RIDE, as well. But this also gets to workforce issues, because we need people who are there to provide these services. And, you know, I was actually it's great the other day, I was out on campus at UMass Amherst, and they've got a great engineering department there, and one that's focused on transportation. And what they wanted to show me, and I wanted to see, was some of the incredible work that they're doing using cameras that are on robotic chairs that help capture what obstacles a person in a wheelchair may encounter when getting around a built environment. And the goal, of course, is to address that and make that more accessible. And, you know, that's just an example of something that's happening right here in the state, work that we need to invest in and do. So look, I'm the civil rights lawyer. You know, I'm still the civil rights lawyer from the Civil Rights Division, and, you know, dealing with cases that have been filed where people haven't had access to housing, to jobs, to transportation. I mean, these are the basic building blocks of life, education, right? And as governor, I promise you, I will do everything in my power to make sure that no person with a disability is denied any of those experiences.
Wow, thank you so much, Attorney General Healey. That's so strengthening on providing the resources to system-wide accessibility to the ride, and that sounds like a really cool innovation project with the robots to look at the obstacles and take down those obstacles. And it's really exciting to hear about the transportation opportunities that lie ahead for accessibility. And I know you also described your support for housing as another fundamental building block in your opening remarks with MRVP and AHVP. And I also want to jump to another building block that you mentioned on employment. And this is really coming from the state, the desire for the state to be a leader in hiring people with disabilities who, as a group in general, are underrepresented in both the public and private workforce. And I want to ask if your administration will support initiatives to hire people with disabilities in state government, including establishing concrete goals and holding agencies to established metrics.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, first of all, everyone deserves the opportunity for employment, and I'm going to make sure that we're doing everything we can to ensure that people with disabilities have access to meaningful employment. Employment that they are going to not only benefit from in terms of financial independence, which is so important, but also that reflects, you know, who they are and all they can be about. And, you know, that means education, that means the resources that we've talked about, it means the supportive resources. And the other thing is, we need a thriving workforce in this state. I mentioned to you the number of jobs that are open and available. This is in our collective interest to be doing everything we can to grow a workforce. And, you know, I think that we need to make sure that we are strengthening all the connections out there, the connections that exist between, you know, Department of Labor, Mass Rehabilitation Commission, Commission for the Blind, Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, DDS, and also the private sector, right? And making sure that, you know, things are synced up there. And I think that we could be doing more with that. I also think that we could be doing more in expanding our educational opportunities earlier on, whether it's through vocational education and training, or other programs, to give people with disabilities the skills and the knowledge they need to benefit also from what are emerging as new jobs and new opportunities in this state. And, you know, the advent of technology has been a game changer in so many respects. And we just need to do everything we can to expand those employment opportunities, the training for that, and then the partnerships where, you know, employers, yes, including state agencies and entities who should be held accountable, but also our private employers who can see the win-win in all of this. And, I think sometimes, things that get in the way are funding and lack of imagination. And I'm not going to let either of those things impede us any further in terms of barriers for people with disabilities when it comes to employment.
Thank you. Thank you for that response and really for paving the way in both the public and private sectors to support employment for people with disabilities. I want to go to another question about self-direction, which is a model of long-term service delivery that empowers people with disabilities to take control of the what, the when, and the how they receive their services and supports. Many folks in the disability community consider self-direction to be a matter of human rights and fundamental to independent living. And the question is, how will you support self-direction for people with disabilities in getting their services and supports?
Well, I absolutely support a self-direction model that helps people with disabilities and their families make informed choices. And we know that, there really are and should be a recognition that, there needs to be a range of options because we're all different with similarities, but as human beings, we're all individuals. So what is it we need to do to make sure that we are out there with the options, supporting people with disabilities and having the options available to them to make the decisions about how they receive their care and how they utilize their services and what is going to work best, what supports are going to work best for them and for their families. And, people of all ages with all types of disabilities should be able to maintain their independence at home. And, I think that's why, if you look at something like the Real Lives Law, right, that was passed is so important. It was intended to expand self-direction services and that model here in the state. And so that's something that, we need to support. And, I've heard that there's a lot more work we need to do to better implement the law. And I'm committed to working with all of you, as I know Mayor Driscoll is, in making sure that happens. And, I know we want to empower DDS and the Self-Determination Advisory Board to receive constructive feedback so that we can do what needs doing.
Thank you. Thank you for strengthening DDS, the Self-Determination Advisory Board, strong implementation for Real Lives Law. Thank you very much. And I know we promised that this event would be about 45 minutes long, and we're getting close to that now. And I want to thank you, Attorney General Healey, for your really thoughtful and well-reasoned responses that really show a deep understanding of the issues that people with disabilities are facing. And I would like to hand the virtual spotlight back to you once more for your closing remarks, and then we'll finish up the event, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Diana. And thank you for having me on with all of you here today. It's been great to be able to share a little bit of my perspective on things. Just know that I am driven to this work because I believe in the people of our state, all of the people of our state. And I believe that great things are possible here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts if we work together. We have a lot going for us in this state. We have, through the years, through important civil rights legislation and initiatives and efforts and advocacy, yes, including litigation brought by some represented on this call, we have got things to a certain place, but we have so much more work to do. And I promise you that as governor, I will hear you, I will see you, I will listen to you, I will meet you where you are, and I will work every day to find ways when it comes to the issue of disability rights and folks with disability in our state. I will do everything I can to support with resources, with education, with training, with lifting up and amplification, so that people understand more about the wonderful richness and vibrancy across the disability community. And I hope I'm not offending anyone, because it is not a monolith. It is a community with lots of variation and different parts and needs and the like, and experiences. But just know that as governor, I'm going to do everything that I can to be there to support, because we deprive ourselves as a Commonwealth when we fail to recognize the dignity, the worth, and the capacity of each person in this state. And I want to work hard to eliminate any barriers that exist when it comes to education, healthcare, employment, housing, transportation, for people with disabilities and their families. And that is something I promise to do. And I will only be successful if Kim Driscoll and I are able to do that in partnership, in collaboration with all of you. So thank you for the work you continue to do.
Thank you so much for your closing remarks, Attorney General Healey, and thank you so much on behalf of our audience and our event sponsors and the disability community of Massachusetts. Thanks for taking the time to virtually sit down with us today and share your thoughts and perspectives, and really a vision. Yeah.
Well, thank you. And I don't mean to cut you off, Diana. One thing that I found really important in leading, an organizational team is representation matters. And, I just am committing to you that not only will we have strong and robust boards and commissions and agencies that are specifically focused on issues of disability, but I think, as important, we need to have representation from the disability community across boards and agencies and commissions generally. And I think with that, we're going to be able to move further ahead, because people will see and better understand. You're at Google today. Thank God, you're doing the work that you do as a software engineer. We're lucky to have you. We want to keep you in Massachusetts. But I think that kind of exposure is very important. And one way I think the executive branch can help do that is, who it decides to put on various boards and agencies and commissions across a range of sectors and spaces. And there will be representation. I will be looking for and asking for representation, if elected, from the disability community.
Absolutely right on with representation. Yeah, I think this is a fundamental way to get disability issues integrated into all policy areas if we have strong representation from the disability community. So thank you. That's great to hear that this will be coming to the forefront with your leadership as governor. Yeah. And thank you again for sharing this vision of how Massachusetts will look for people with disabilities when you're a governor. And I want to also give thanks to all the sponsoring organizations, to the interpreters and the card captioner, and to the tech team for making this event possible. And I want to thank everyone in the audience for tuning in. I hope this event really gives you more insight into Attorney General Healey's thinking and policies when it comes to supporting disability rights and services and representation. This event is part of a larger call to action to get ready to vote for your governor on November 8th. Our organizations are nonpartisan, but we urge that the voice of the disabled be heard in the policies of our great state and beyond. As the renowned disability rights activist Justin Dart once said, vote as if your life depends on it, because it does. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.